Hi, I'm Ed. Welcome to Common Sense.
And I'm John, and we have another very special guest today, Kathleen Booth, who is a friend of both of ours for quite a few years. Kathleen is the Vice President of Marketing at Impact Branding and Design, which, if you don't know them, everybody does by now, but one of the top inbound marketing agencies and HubSpot partners in the industry. And as I mentioned, we've both known her for quite a few years, going back to when Kathleen was the owner and CEO of Quintain Marketing, which was one of the very first HubSpot partners more than 10 years ago. So welcome, Kathleen. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you guys for having me. I'm so honored that you asked me to come on.
Well, thanks for joining.
No, not at all. You were like the very first person we thought of. So,
well, I'm glad to return the favor then, because John, I think you were the first guest on my podcast, and Ed, you were not long thereafter. So,
right.
I remember that was awesome, and it still is. Yeah. Well, our topic today is a little bit off the inbound marketing topic, although maybe we'll bring it around. But we thought we'd talk about customer journey and customer experience, two big, huge buzzwords, and talk about those from the perspectives of B2B companies and the agencies that serve them, like Quintain and others, and Impact, obviously. So why don't we start there, Kathleen? What's the difference between customer experience and customer journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that they are both very heavily used terms that people throw around casually. To me, at least, and I'm I didn't look this up in the dictionary in advance. I'm just telling you my thoughts. But to me, the customer journey is the steps that the individual person goes through as they go from realizing a need to solving for that need, whether that is talking with a company or a salesperson, whether that is doing online research, talking to friends, what have you. It is all those steps that they go through in their own personal journey, not to reuse the word, but their own personal path to purchasing. Whereas customer experience, at least the way I look at it is that is the impression that journey has on them. Is it positive? Is it negative? What were their emotions and sentiments as they traveled that path to purchase?
That's really good. I would wholeheartedly support your definition. But I think what maybe a lot of
kind of like that definition of pornography, though, it's one of those things where, I mean, bad customer experience when you're experiencing it, but the good customer experience, it really, what makes it good is it is transparent. You almost don't even think about it. So it's a weird thing where, in my experience, when I think about customer experience, it's when it's bad. Am I just weird, or have you all had that same sort of impression?
I mean, I think that there's a spectrum, right? There's from terrible to phenomenal. And I think that unfortunately, most customer experiences probably sit in the neutral. Like if we were doing a net promoter score for customer experiences on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, I think most probably tend to sit in that 4 to 6 range, which technically is not good. It's neutral, but it's not good. And I think that, yeah, you definitely notice the really bad ones. I think sadly, there's more really bad ones than there are really, really phenomenal ones. But I would say when it's really great, I notice it. It just doesn't happen nearly as often.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because you being a marketer, we're all three of us marketers, but we tend to think of customer journey and customer experience as pre-sale. And then it's really after sale that most of it actually happens. So that's an area that I think is interesting. It's often been offloaded to the customer service department, whatever that is, or sometimes specialty agencies that do that stuff, like call centers, for example.
As we often talk about, John, and I think that part of where Kathleen's insight is going to be particularly helpful, we think of it that way, but the buyer has one single customer experience.
Exactly.
One continuum of experience with the company they're working with, regardless of what title we're putting on them at some stage, as we've ascribed a journey upon them. And that's, I think, the beauty of some of the work that Kathleen has done, and the things she talks about is recognizing that that buyer just has one experience at different stages of that life cycle.
Well, it's interesting. I think I have a lot of opinions on this subject.
Good.
I come at it from a little bit of a different perspective than I think a lot of other marketers do. The reason being that my old agency, when we first started, we were not an inbound agency at Quintain. We actually sold promotional products, which people called by many names, tchotchkes, swag. There are more pejorative ones as well. But we started out doing that just because my husband happened to come from another company that did that. And we kind of became an inbound agency. I won't tell that story, but, and through the years, right up until the very end, we were still selling promotional products. And you can look at that as just selling people branded stuff. But one of the reasons that half of our business, and it was at least 50% of it, was successful is that we looked at it more than just selling people stuff. If you're in that business and you're doing it right, you're dealing a lot with customer experience, because a lot of our clients, some of them would hire us more on the front end demand gen or lead gen side. Like, how can we come up with a product we can send to prospects to get them to take our call and take a meeting? We did plenty of that. But we also did a lot of customer gifting. Either somebody would sign a new client and send them something. Like, I have so many great stories. Like one client that sent out branded and customized, personalized Louisville Slugger bats to new clients. And they would say, welcome to the team, with that person's name engraved in the Louisville Slugger and the company's logo. Like, talk about, if you got that in the mail, you're not throwing away a Louisville Slugger bat. And then other times where it was holiday gifts or customer loyalty programs. So we did a lot of work in that area. Now, granted, it all had to do with promotional products, so it wasn't a holistic thing, but I got a little taste of it, and how very differently companies can approach it. So there are some that check the box. Just take, for example, the time of year we're in right now where we're talking, which is the holidays. There are some companies that don't do anything for their clients at the holidays. They let that opportunity pass. There are others that check the box and order some crummy little tchotchke, which is where we get the bad reputation.
Or send an e-card, big deal, right?
Yeah. And then there are others, like I just got the most amazing thing in the mail from a company that we do business with at Impact, and they sent this giant box. It was a huge solid chocolate bar, like a blown up version of a Hershey bar.
Nice.
That the chocolate bar was engraved to look like the front page of a newspaper, and all of the news articles were custom to this particular company. Like, they wrote it, they designed the artwork, the whole thing, and it came with a silver hammer that was branded with their logo for you to smash it apart and eat it. And it was just, the attention to detail was so phenomenal. Everybody in our office wanted to look at it. People took multiple pictures of it. We made a video to thank them for it. Like, that was an extraordinary experience.
Yeah, and to Ed's point, that kind of thing would be extremely effective in sales as well as in customer success, customer experience, all the way down the line. And those are outstanding examples.
But it's not just, the one thing I do want to say is it's not just the grand gestures, because it can be easy to think like you have to spend a lot of money or put a ton of effort in. The other example that I experienced this week, which really was phenomenal, was I subscribed to a new email newsletter of a company. It's actually in Asia, and they do a newsletter on design and user experience. And I'd heard about it through another publication. And so I just subscribed, and I got the usual confirmation email, but then I got an individual email from the guy that writes the newsletter saying, just wanted to thank you for subscribing, and reach out and say, this is not a bot. This is not a workflow. This is me writing to you with my name, with my company name, and asking, how'd you hear about the newsletter? What are you hoping to get out of it? And just kind of giving me a shout out saying, hey, I see that you're located in Connecticut. Is that correct? Like, clearly put the time in to show me that he was not a robot. And then not only did he do that, which I did reply to, But when I got my first issue of the email newsletter, the opening paragraph was shout out to all these companies that just subscribed, and our company name was in that paragraph. And I was like, that's
Wow.
amazing. Cost nothing, but wow, did that make an impression? So.
Well, I think, there's been a lot of attention, as we talked about at the beginning, placed on this topic and how companies can really improve not only top line revenue, but, building revenues in the future, improving retention rates, all of those kinds of benefits accrue here. And yet it's not one of the most emphasized art forms, so to speak. You don't see a lot of agencies focusing on CX and customer journey. Do you think that's changing, or do you think it will change?
So those are two very different questions.
Yeah.
I don't think it's changing, unfortunately. I hear a lot of lip service, but I don't actually see anything happening. I don't know if it will change. I think it should change. But it's, it's an uncomfortable change because especially in agencies, I mean, I used to own an agency, and most great agencies are built around some degree of scalability in what you do, right? You come up with your system and you replicate it time and time again, and hopefully it gets good results. And going into customer experience requires us to step outside of our system. And that makes it, at least initially, less scalable. So it's scary, and we don't know if it's going to work, which is even scarier. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but I will say that I don't know how we can be successful if we don't go into that area, because at least what I'm seeing is that we have done our jobs too well as content marketers and as marketers, and we have overly saturated our audiences with information, much of which is pretty crummy information. And as a result, I think it's really only the companies that are able to take it to that, back to that scale of 1 to 10 to an 8 to a 10 that are going to be successful. And that requires that personal touch and making your audience really feel special, however you do that. And for most businesses, if they can't do that, I think churn is going to be a big issue. And if churn is a big issue, that goes back and smacks the marketer right back on the butt. It's like a vicious cycle.
So the interesting thing about that, you mentioned how much of the content marketing has become banal. And if you look at the way companies talk about improving their CX, a lot of them are just kind of checking the box. There's the same kind of vapid crap that you see in that user experience that you're now seeing in the content creation. And so the fact that some company says they're doing it and may even follow a checklist and do a certain number of activities is so different than actually making it part of the culture and making it part of the philosophy and making sure that everyone in every action embraces it. And that feels to me like the differentiator. And that's something that you can't address by a set of technical steps. You can only address by really understanding the buyer and really embracing it as part of the culture. Or am I just cynical?
No, I totally agree with you, because we have this conversation all the time at Impact. So I will give credit where credit is due and say that Bob Ruffalo, who's the CEO, is an incredible visionary. And sometimes I don't see the vision right away, but I've learned to kind of trust him on that. And he is absolutely obsessive over creating a great customer experience. And to the point where I got in hot water a couple times when I first started in my marketing position, because I sent out emails to a large portion of our database about, at one point it was like a new service we were releasing. And he was like, don't ever do that again. Like, we don't do direct sales offers, because he's passionate that, like, that's like walking into a cocktail party, and if I were to meet a new guy and be like, hey, let's go on a date, without having a conversation first. Like, he is so passionate about that sometimes I feel like it can make it hard to do my job, but that's a good challenge, right? But that's the kind of culture that you have to build, and it can't just be the person at the top that sees it, because otherwise you have people like me who get into the marketing role and are used to doing things a certain way, and you send out the email because that's what you always have done. And part of what I've been working on this past year is really trying to align better with Bob's vision and embrace it and really understand how that needs to trickle down through every aspect of what we do. So like, trying to generate leads without sending out emails to people saying, hey, do you need a website redesign? Or wouldn't you like to do this? It's a challenge, but it's a good challenge. So something that I think definitely inhibits adoption, because it's much easier to do things the usual way than it is to try a new approach and to really try to solve for the customer.
I think a good middle ground is starting to emerge, and that's like customer journey mapping, where you actually take a look at how you interface with your clients, kind of it doesn't have to be graphical, but in a sort of an organized way. What are all those touch points, and where are we failing? Where is the ball being dropped, or where are we doing the best? And you can get some of that from the data itself, but it's better, obviously, to talk to your customers about it. What about that? Isn't that a good place for marketers to at least start to get into this business and understand what's really working well for customers, as opposed to, just lead generation numbers and things like that?
Yeah, I think there's two issues underlying that. One is absolutely, I couldn't agree more, the customer journey is really important. And I think that we've oversimplified it to our own detriment. When we look at like attract, convert, close, that is so dumbed down as to be virtually useless. And the reality is that for many businesses, it's not as simple as, oh, they're closed, boom, they're now a customer. It's very cyclical. People come back and buy more things or different things. So the model that I like better than attract, convert, close is actually Digital Marketer has something called the Value Journey Canvas, which kind of looks like a game of chutes and ladders, but I think that's probably closer to reality. And not that that's, a perfect depiction either, because I think you have to recognize that it's going to be different for every business and every customer. But yeah, you got to start with that. The biggest problem, though, I think, is that organizationally, we're not set up with the right incentives, because, if you have a marketer, whether it's outsourced to an agency or whether you're talking about your in-house department, they're going to work to whatever their success criteria is. And if you as a company set that success criteria up as leads, marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, which is what most companies do, you're going to get a marketer who isn't focused on the post-close customer experience. It's just not going to happen. And nor should it. There's no reason that marketers should distract themselves by working on things that don't contribute to their ability to successfully meet the requirements of their job. So I think it has to start with organizations really rethinking what success looks like for marketers, and actually looking at it more holistically as, how do our teams work together within the company for success? And that's where I think actually software companies really get it right, because they tend to have growth teams, which have a product person, a marketer, maybe even a salesperson, all sitting together and looking at something holistically. And I think that's a much better model.
But the pitter patter has to match the chitter chatter. And for a company to be able to advise somebody on it, they have to actually live it themselves. I love in the HubSpot customer code this point about making it so hard to unsubscribe. It drives me nuts. And for a company to say we're customer friendly and let you do everything you want online, but make it so incredibly opaque and difficult to figure out. First of all, you got to call a number, and what number to call, and what menus to punch in, and what you have to say, the secret password in order to actually be able to cancel. It's infuriating. And so many companies talk about it one way, say they can advise or say they do it a different way, and their behavior actually belies a much more traditional attitude. I think is disrespectful to the buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think we tend to fall back too often on like industry norms. So I know, you guys know the agency space as well as I do. And it's very easy to say, well, for example, we can't give a guarantee, or we can't charge a client based on the cost per lead, or all these other we can't statements that you hear, when in reality, you hear customers asking for these things all of the time. And I don't know the answer. Maybe we can't. Maybe we really can't. But I think that we as marketers and as business owners and business leaders have to start asking ourselves, why not? Why? And throwing out those assumptions. And let's pretend for a minute that it is possible. Because if you look at these other industries, I was just doing an interview the other day with Marcus Sheridan for my podcast. And we talked about, he used to always give the example of CarMax as being very forward thinking in the car industry, because they broke that idea that there need to be all this haggling. Well, now CarMax is being overtaken by Carvana because you can literally buy a car out of a vending machine. If Carvana can sell you a car out of a vending machine, to me, that says that anything is possible. Like that to me was one of the hardest things to overcome. Anything's possible. So how can we be the one to make it possible? Because somebody will if we don't.
But then you take it a step further and you think about how Lyft is investing in scooters, because they're not really thinking about scooters. They're thinking about moving from one place to another. Or maybe it was Uber. I could be embarrassing myself. I think it was Lyft. But also soon, people aren't going to be buying cars. They're going to have a subscription for a car. And so coming out of that vending machine will be, this month's key for the subscription or something. And if people just think that their business is making and selling cars, they'll miss it, as opposed to transportation. And that's so applicable in so many of the areas of our businesses and our clients too. And your point is right. I mean, what people want is leads. They don't want marketing. They want leads, but really they want sales. And so how do you get them to sales? And are there other ways to do it?
In fact, if they never had to do or think about marketing and still get leads, they would for sure pick that option.
Absolutely.
And I'd go even further. I'd say they don't just want sales. They want growth in revenue, and growth in profitability. So how do we get there? Well, one of the ways we could get there is tightening up their CX, is making it a much better approach. And we're good at that. Marketers are really good at looking at the big picture and kind of coming up with creative ideas.
Marketers always default to some technology magic bullet. I know.
Well,
you and I talked about this, John. I know you had in mind asking Kathleen her opinion about technology too. I mean, is there a magic bullet technology that somehow helps CX, or is it just hard work every day, understanding that journey and that experience and making a lot of incremental tweaks with what you already have to improve it?
Well, I would take issue with one thing that you said, Ed, which is that marketers always default to technology. I think in the space that we live in our particular inbound marketing agency space, yes, because a lot of us went down this path because we were affiliated with a certain technology platform. But I think if you look at the world of marketing, especially when you talk about big brands, it's actually almost the opposite. They're not thinking about technology at all. They do a much better job of really diving into the psychology of the buyer and focusing on strategy more so than tactical execution. We live in a very tactical world, and therefore we're very enmeshed with the technology that we rely on to execute. So I think in some respects, this inbound agency world, we would be well served to take a lesson from the big agencies and learn how to take a step back and be more strategic. Heck, I think we could probably make a hell of a lot more money if we were doing more of that, because the margins are higher and there's a lot more value placed on that at the end of the day. It's less commoditized.
So and it's point. A differentiator from each other. We're all competing with each other, and who's actually stepping into the CX world? Nobody.
Yeah.
Kind of a great opportunity.
Absolutely.
Well, cool. So what's up with you guys for 2019? What's on your roadmap that we should all know about, especially having to do with customer service? But if that's okay if it's not.
Well, it actually is, I would say. So as I mentioned earlier, Bob is really kind of obsessive in a good way about delivering value and delivering great experiences to clients and even beyond clients. Truthfully, he's very obsessed with delivering value to our audience. And I wouldn't say we're by any stretch of the imagination the role model for this. We're on that journey. We're trying to get better every day, but we have a lot more to go. So what we're focused on is a couple of things. One is continuing the journey we started about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, which is really making that shift as a business to leading as a publisher. We strongly believe that it's not only good for our audience, it's good for our business. And when you lead as a publisher, essentially what you're doing is delivering a lot of value at no cost to anybody who wants to just come to your website and learn. So, we really want our site to have something for everyone, not just people that want to hire our agency. And so I even get pushback sometimes internally within the company. Why are we putting all these resources into being a publisher? What is that doing for us? Well, it's a long-term play based on the belief that if we can deliver value to everyone that comes to us, regardless of their ability to pay or their ability to hire us, ultimately down the road, that's going to deliver us what we need as a business to thrive, whether that's people would hire us someday as an agency, or maybe it's somebody else wants to sponsor the content on our site or do a sponsored webinar because they want to get in front of that audience. You know, it's a solution that is a longer term play, and we continue to travel that path. And we're looking not at, you know, models within the marketing industry. We're looking at like Forbes and Inc. magazine and Fast Company and Harvard Business Review, looking at what they're doing and seeing how can we do something more like that on the publisher side. On the agency side, we're having some very interesting discussions about and soul searching about what really works for our clients. And one of the conclusions that we're really coming to is that it really doesn't work to take a do-it-for-me approach for content creation. When we look at the results that clients are getting, the clients that are creating their own content are getting dramatically better results than the ones that are outsourcing it. And so we're laying the groundwork. I think you'll see in first quarter of next year, we're doing an internal reorganization to support this, and our website's going to be somewhat revamped to support this, but we're really trying to move in the direction of supporting our clients, teaching a man to fish as opposed to giving him a fish, so that they can have longer term, more sustainable success with their content marketing.
That's interesting and really unique, I think. You know, I think that's the direction to go in.
Spot on. I
really,
think based on what you and I have seen routinely.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little scary because a lot of companies come to you and they say, I don't want to write my stuff. I want you to do it. And, you know, at some point in this journey that we're on, we'll get to a point where we'll say, no, you know, we can't do that because we can't, in all good conscience, take your money to do something for you that isn't going to give you results, right? I mean, that's sort of where you get to.
And that
but we can teach
it. Yeah. It worked 5 years ago. It just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's to bring it back to CX. If you look at your content as part of the experience your customers are going to have, how can you really deliver a phenomenal customer experience if the content isn't coming from you? It's very inauthentic.
Well, this has been a fabulous conversation. I think we're up against time. It's been wonderful to have you, Kathleen. Thank you for joining us.
This is fun. I love debating these issues with you guys.
Well, we didn't even really debate this time. We all agree we're going to find something we could debate next time.
I know. We got to start talking about politics or religion or something.
Yeah, thanks again, Kathleen. And you can find Kathleen and her merry band of marketers at Impact Branding by going to impactbnd.com or by joining the Impact Elite Facebook group, which is great, or by searching for Kathleen on LinkedIn and checking out her Twitter feed at Work Mommy Work. I love that.
Thanks
again. Talk to you soon.
It was fun.